Well, hello everyone, wherever you happen to be today. I am Michael Hingson, and you are listening to the podcast entitled Unstoppable Mindset. Our guest today is Garry Cole. Now, let's see, what can I say about Garry? Well, Garry is a Wolverine fan, being from Michigan, and I live in Southern California, and I am a USC fan. And nowadays we're in the same conference, which is kind of really weird, but hey, what do you do? Works for me. I don't mind being in the same conference, football wise and otherwise. But anyway, so Garry is a Wolverine fan, and I'm a well. I like USC because my wife did her graduate work at USC, but I come from the University of California at Irvine. So Zot, go anteaters, and that's all there is to it. Anyway, Garry, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're glad you're here.
Michael, thank you. And thank you for that recognition. Yes, I'm a big fan. Go Blue. And I have mixed emotions about letting USC and the rest of you Westerners into our conference because I hearken back to the days of the Rose Bowl
Yeah.
when we would come out there. And unfortunately, you'd always beat us. I always say that our team was always doing an overnight sleepover the night before the game. That's why we lose so much. But yes, welcome to the Big Ten, which is now like the Big 20 or whatever. And we're glad to have you.
Well, it could be all those prime rib eating things that happened a day or two before the game, but hey, whatever.
There's
But
that.
yeah, it is strange. It's a strange feeling to see that the Pac-12 is mostly essentially gone away, and now it's the big whatever it is. But we'll cope.
Yes, we will. And we'll be
So
happy.
I'll just say, as long as our conference wins every year, it's okay.
Um, well, that we will draw the straw there and say we'll agree to disagree on that one. But
Well,
thank
I
you.
mean, I mean, only because we're all in the same conference now. That's the only
Oh,
reason
I'm
I'm
sorry.
saying
You're
it.
right. You're right.
Yeah.
I do want to thank you for having me on your podcast, Michael. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I am excited about our conversation today. We'll get to it, and I'm sure we'll talk about it. But aging and doing it well is sort of a topic that's near and dear to me, and it's really important to all of us, and maybe even all of our listeners, because you know what? We all age. We
We
all
do.
get older. And if we do it better, if we do it well, there's always a better outcome. And that outcome I always point to, health and happiness and possibly even a longer life. And those things all kind of go together. So it's become one of my favorite topics to talk about. So thank you for allowing us to talk about it again today.
Sure, absolutely. Well, before we start on some of the questions that I had in mind and all that, now you got me really curious. What got you started down this whole road of talking about aging? Why are you doing that?
Well, there's probably a couple things. I'm going to give you the long answer. Part of it is that I myself am in that aging category. I'm a baby boomer. You know,
As am
that
I.
big, yes, that big age demographic of 1946 to 1964. I don't know if you knew this, but our demographic is so large that we have our own nickname. Do you know what that nickname is?
I'm not sure. The Silver Tsunami.
Yes, that's the nickname that I know us by.
Yeah,
And so, yes, I feel proud to be part of that tsunami.
yeah.
The other thing about me, and I'm going to get to, why I'm getting into this, but as we age, we go through transitions. And January 1st, I made a big transition into the retirement process.
Ah,
And my dad, when he retired, used to say how busy he was. And I would hang up the phone after talking to him, wondering to myself, what made him so busy? He's retired. Well, now I understand. And busy is important for me and important for us as we
yeah.
as we live in this. So part of those things sort of got me into this aging process and wanted to understand more about it.
Well, it makes sense, and yeah, we're both in the same generation and in the same era, and that's fine. I think that it's important to have good perspectives and good discussions about the whole concept of aging, because unfortunately, a lot of society is trying to teach us to fear it and trying to teach everyone to fear it. And the reality is why? Because the fact is, it is something that happens. And the more things that we fear, the shorter our lifespans are going to be. So it really makes a lot of sense to not fear as much as we do. I wrote a book called "Live Like a Guide Dog: True Stories from a Blind Man, His Guide Dogs, and True Stories from a Blind Man and His Dogs about being brave, overcoming adversity, and moving forward in faith." And it was all about learning to control fear and learning to recognize that 95+% of the things that we worry about are things over which we have absolutely no control. And why are we afraid of them? But we tend to be, and we need to learn to not do that so much.
Absolutely. And certainly aging is one of those fears that, although ultimately we don't have much control over, but ironically, and this is one of the things I've understood, is that we do have more control over the aging process and how well we age than we once thought. And I think that's important. That's one of the things that I enjoy doing, is how do I manage my aging process? So it's kind of cool.
Well, let's start at the other end of the spectrum. Tell us a little bit about the early Garry growing up and so on.
The early Garry, how far do I go back? I grew
Oh,
up in
to
the
the beginning. What the heck?
Yes, I grew up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It was a wonderful time of life. And I grew up with a two-parent household. And eventually then, as I watched my parents age, things were different back then. The
Mhm.
aging process was different back then. The science wasn't developed in terms of what caused us to age, other than the fact that we live and live another day, and what we can do about it. So I watched my two parents age differently, actually. My dad lived to be 95 years old. And, that is far and away, almost 20 years more than the average at that time,
Mhm.
probably was 20 years more than the average male adult in the United States. My mom passed away at the age of 80 from Parkinson's. So I watched them age, and that also was part of the reason I wanted to understand more about it. So yeah, the early years were great, loved them, and then went through the middle life crisis as everyone does, and now on the, call it, the upside of life. When I'm talking about where at that, I'll talk about the U-shaped happiness curve. But on the ups, in my opinion, I'm on the upside of life and looking forward to what's happening next.
Yeah, and I always believe that life is an adventure, and I think I got some of that. Although my parents never verbalized it as such, I think I got it from them. I certainly got an attitude of the fact that just because I happen to be blind, it doesn't mean I can't do things. I got that from my parents because the doctors told them when I was diagnosed as being blind at 4 months of age, they said, send the kid to a home away from you guys because all he's going to do is suck up all the love that you would have for
Uh,
your older son, and blind kids can't grow up to do anything anyway. And my parents
oh
both said,
goodness.
no, you're wrong. And so I grew up very fortunately with parents that were much more visionary than the doctors and a lot of other people were and are.
And that certainly speaks to your parents and your loving parents and how they were able to give you an opportunity to grow up and live a life that is rich and fulfilling for you. Because any other way, I'm sure would have been much, much, much different. So
Oh, I
thank you for
think
sharing the story.
I think so. And my wife and I were married for 40 years. She passed away in 2022. We had been married 40 years. She was 73, and basically, she was in a wheelchair her whole life, and the body just slows down eventually, and hers did. And so, as I tell people, she's monitoring me from somewhere. So I got to be a good kid,
Oh,
otherwise I'll get in trouble.
that's great. I believe the same thing. We could probably go off in a different direction and talk about faith and what's next, but that's probably not the topic for today.
Oh, it
So,
can be if we want, but yeah. But I continue to work and not ready to retire yet, and I don't have the income saved to do that because we had to spend money on things that insurance companies didn't pay for her and all that. But that's okay.
yeah.
We move on and we grow and we do the things that we got to do, and we survive, and that's all that
Yes.
really matters.
Yeah.
Well, not survive, but we flourish and we prosper, and I think that's important. And I think more people should really take a more positive attitude about life and look at how they can prosper than they tend to do.
Yes, so much so. I want to go back to linking two things that you mentioned so far. One was the fact that society looks at aging in a negative light. And also, you asked me what inspired me to go into the aging and understanding it better. And when I tell you a story about that goes back about 7 years, it goes back to my 45-year class reunion, my
Hmm.
high school class reunion. I'll do the math for you and your group tell you how old I was because it's important to the story. I was 63 at the time. There was a group of us that went to the homecoming football game, Friday Night Lights. I loved it back in the day, and
Hmm.
I loved it this night as well until something happened. Toward the end of the game, a group of the students walked by, and one stopped and looked up at my group of 63-year-olds and pointed and shouted out, "Look at all those old people. Look at all those old people." My first reaction was to look around to see who they could be talking about, but I quickly realized that it was in fact me and my 63-year-old friends that they were talking about. And it was the first time, it was the words of that obnoxious teenager that made me think for the first time, am I old? Am I old? And that story sort of inspired me to want to know what is it going to look like to get old? What is it going to look like to age? And more importantly, what does it look like? How do you age well? How do you do it well? So I spent 3 years researching that process. Is it that you aged well? And I learned a great deal about aging and the research, and there was always a lot of good news about that. A lot of good news about that. And so I did the research myself, but then I ended up wanting to share it up with others and with my book that I wrote and published 2 years ago. And I continue to blog and do speaking engagements and podcasts like yours. So that is the full story about how I really kind of got into this whole aging thing and how I got involved and how I became interested in it.
Well, and I hear you. I am a firm believer in the reality that you choose whether you really in the parlance of what society views it as being, you choose whether you want to be old or not. And I don't view myself as old. It doesn't matter how much time I've been here. I'm not old. But I believe that I have good faculties, and I'm going to do my best to keep them, and and continue to function and survive. And I believe that other people can do the same thing. And if we just decide that we're going to get old and we're not going to live much longer, that'll probably be what happens. But I don't tend to take that approach.
It's interesting you say you're not old and you don't want to be. I will say this. Society would suggest that you and I are old, or at
Oh
least
yeah.
their society. And one of my favorite chapters in the book is we need to rebrand the word old. I was a marketing guy in my career, and branding was very, very important. Of course it was. It's all about what you think of that. And so I spent a conversation, I called my chapter's conversation. I spent the whole conversation about how we can rebrand the term old and words like vintage and how vintage, which means the same thing. When you think about old and
Hmm.
vintage, they are the same thing. Historically, they are of aging. And so I sort of go on to say that maybe the word old really should take on the word vintage, and we should talk about ourselves in that way. Yeah, we're old. We're old, and there's nothing wrong with it. But unfortunately, the word old still remains a three-letter word that acts like a four-letter word.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be a four-letter word. And by the way, I do have a trick to that. I do have a trick to that. You can add ER to the word OLD or old, and the word older seems to be fine. The word older, nobody has a problem with. But if you go back to the word old, we all seem to have a problem. We don't want to be old. We can be older, but we don't want to be old.
And unfortunately, to a large degree, society in dealing with the whole issue of old and aging and so on overall does other things, like they decide how capable we are, how limited or limitless we are, and they decide that, well, you're old enough now that you can't really add value to our company anymore. And the reality is, there's a lot to be said for experience that people rule out way too often.
Yes, very much so. And that is changing. Um,
Yeah.
ageism, ageism is still a problem in our society. When I say our society, let me bring that in to say in America, in the United States. I'm going to talk a little bit about other countries in a second, but it is getting better. People are recognizing exactly what you said, that older adults can add a lot of value in work. And we don't always have to go back to Walmart to be a greeter. And nothing wrong about greeters at Walmart. I think that's maybe my next career. But companies are letting people stay on longer. As a matter of fact, I'll give a shout out to my company, SSDM, their digital marketing firm in Troy. And I went to work there when I was 65, actually, maybe 64. And I said, I'm going to work for 2 years and I'm going to retire. And so I worked for 2 years, and then they continued to say, well, could you stick around? And so it worked out a deal to be sort of a semi-retired. And so we just changed the agreement. And each and every year we would go back to the discussion to say, how about another year? And I did that for another 3 years. So I mentioned I retired this year, but I was actually semi-retired with an excellent company for 3 years because they felt I added value enough that they were willing to keep me around. And I think that was very cool. And more companies are doing that.
Yeah, and there are a couple of sides to that because it's you believing that you add value, and if you keep that mindset, then you'll get other people to believe it too. Because if you just decide, well, I'm not going to really be worth it, then you're contributing to the misconceptions, and you're not doing yourself or anybody else any favors, which doesn't help.
Very much so. That reminds me of one of my favorite quotes about retirement, and it has to do with Tom Brady. I'm a big fan, Tom
Mm.
Brady, right? And I may misquote it a little bit, but Tom was an older quarterback. He was in
Hmm.
the NFL for a long time, and I think he was asked once, Tom, how long are you going to stick around? And his answer, and I may be paraphrasing, but the answer was, until I suck, until I add no more value.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I felt. I'm going to stick around until I don't add the value. And those are your words as well. And so I think that is very, very important. How we feel about aging, how we feel about ourselves, in many cases, is the most important thing, one of the most important things, and how successful we are in the aging process.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and if we feel good about ourselves, if we feel we're able to add value, we will add value. And the reality is, of course, looking at it from an intellectual standpoint, one of the reasons that we can add value is that we have a lot of experience that other people haven't been able to gain yet because
Right.
they haven't been here as long as we have. And in theory, we are picking up a lot of stuff as we go along, and that's important to do.
Absolutely. And and you're right. You mentioned our attitude toward aging, our attitude toward ourselves. And the other thing is facing the reality and dealing with the reality that as we age, things change. Things do change. And one of the things that I was very, very happy about reading, about researching our aging process, is how much control we have over our body and our minds in the aging process. Um, we always felt, growing up, I always felt that it was genetics.
Hmm.
Genetics would determine our health and longevity. And if your parents lived a long time and were healthy, you had a shot. And as it turns out, that's not accurate. That's not accurate. Although genetics play a role, it's just not as large as people once thought. And I think that was one of the really most important things that I researched and that found out and understood. And I think people are still trying to grasp that and get their arms around it, that we have more control of our aging process, physically, mentally, and our emotions than it was once thought.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have thought that way for a long time, and I am a firm believer in that it is really up to us and our mindset as to how well we're going to deal with life. And that's one of the reasons I have always believed that life is an adventure. It's a lot of fun, and we should live it to the fullest.
Yes, we should. And you're absolutely right. We should live it to the fullest. And at the other end of that, it's important we take care of ourselves with our simple daily choices.
Yep.
That's what That's what can affect our body and our brain. And those daily choices over our health and longevity can really make a big, big difference. The other thing I wanted to bring up, and I want to talk about maybe this more later, is our older years, our older years, it's been pointed out, can be some of the happiest years in our life.
Hmm.
And as I've dipped into this thing we call older, I would have to say that I would firmly agree with that. Our older years can absolutely be some of the happiest years of our life, and I think that's great.
Why is that?
First thing is, the genetics thing isn't as much as they thought. Back in the 1990s, there was a study called the twin study. And they looked at these twins and they found out that genetics really only account for about 20 to 40% of our health and longevity. And the rest of it became our environment and our lifestyle choices, And I spend a great deal of time in the book talking about the simplicity of our daily living, our lifestyle choices, and how those things can affect our life. And I go back to a story I used to tell my kids. I used to have what I called mentoring moments with my kids. And if you ask them about those mentoring moments, they'll roll their eyes and shake their head and say, yes, I do remember that. But one of the things that I would say to them, if you want to grow up to be big and strong, you need to sleep well, eat well, and exercise. And I would tell them that more and more. And one of them listened and the other one didn't. My son's actually going to be a doctor soon. He's the one that listened. My daughter, on the other hand, is living her best life in Chicago and still only sleeps about 5 hours a night. But that advice that I gave them back then, as it turns out, is even more important to
Hmm.
us as we age. More important to us as we age. Sleep well, eat well, and exercise. And there are certainly
Yeah.
some other things, but those are the core things that the longevity experts, medical professionals, the scientists will say, start with those three things.
Well, and it makes perfect sense to to do that. Jack LaLanne lived a long time, and every year on New Year's he would swim San Francisco Bay.
Oh, is that what he did? I did not know. How long did he live? I know he lived for a long time.
I don't remember how old he was, but he did the polar bear plunge. He swam the bay, as I recall, every year on New Year's Day. Now I'm not going to do that, but he can.
I'm not a swimmer, so I'm not going to do that either. But I tell you what I do do. I walk every single day and I go to the gym 5 days a week. And I do that because I want to be healthy. I want to live long. I want to
Hmm.
age well. And so that's what I do. But yeah.
One of the things that I didn't do a lot for many years was exercise as much as I could, and there were a lot of reasons for it. There were other things going on, um, and I was married. My wife didn't get to exercise as much as she wanted. Being in a wheelchair, she did
I
some,
understand. Yeah.
but after she passed, one of the things that I discovered, and I actually discovered it even before she passed, was that I could exercise because we live in this house that has a long island. It's probably about, well, it's got to be at least 10 feet long, maybe 15 feet long, maybe
Okay.
only 10. And what I would do was I would find any excuse I could to, as I was walk around the island rather than taking a shortcut. And after Karen passed away, I would put on audiobooks and I would just do laps around the island. And I can get 15,000 steps in and enjoy it because I'm reading a book or whatever at the same time. So I get a lot of exercise that way, and I find that to be kind of fun. And I monitor steps through my Apple Watch, and it keeps me honest. So that's a good thing.
That's a great thing. That's a great thing. And you know what? The word exercise is kind of one of those bad words also that people don't want to do. So I often will say, let's change the assignment to just movement. And
Yeah.
walking is certainly one of those movements that older adults take advantage of, and they should. I'm gonna give you a little factoid here, and I think you will know the answer. How many steps is it that we're supposed to take every day?
Oh, I don't know whether I know the answer. 10,000?
10,000 is the answer everybody will tell you. And I'll tell you that number is not based on science. This is a little interesting fact,
Yeah.
fun fact. is actually based on a 1965 Japanese company called Yamaso Clock Company. They made a pedometer and
Mm,
named it Manpo Kai, which in Japanese means 10,000 steps. So
okay.
really, the 10,000 steps became it was a marketing gimmick because people could remember 10,000. That's the number they remember. So even today, people think that 10,000 steps is the magic number. Science will tell us that the health benefits kick in at about 4,400 steps to 7,500 steps,
Hmm,
depending on their speed and your terrain. Now, make no mistake, the more the merrier. So if you walk 10,000 steps, that's better than,
sure.
but really that 10,000 steps that we all have mentally ingrained was really just a marketing gimmick from a Japanese company back in 1965.
Well,
Marketing.
that's what my Apple Watch also says should be my goal. So I've just stuck with it. I figure as long as I can walk and do it, and oftentimes I will make sure I set a goal to get above 10,000. But again, I get more reading in that way too, so it works out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I I probably don't get 10,000. Well, I probably do, but I don't get it up in my walk. My walk distance was always triggered based on my dog. I would walk my dog every morning.
Hmm.
And toward the end of her life, she just wasn't able to walk as far. And so I was adjusting my walking to her ability to walk. And so I would say, though, that when I go to the gym and add those extra steps there and just other things that I do around the house, it is good. You mentioned just using your house as a exercise treatment. And I love that because I enjoy walking up and down the stairs.
Yeah.
It, for me, is a great workout. Walking up and down the stairs is one of the things that I enjoy doing because I feel like I'm adding years to my life, and that's what it is.
And you probably are.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I know since we moved to Victorville, which we did in 2014, well, actually, when we moved into the house here in late 2016, I actually started to work on losing weight. And I have lost since basically the beginning of 2017, I've lost 80 pounds.
Wow.
And so,
Good.
and a lot of that has to do with what I eat also. And I agree with you that eating healthy is important. And my wife and I tended to really work at eating pretty heart healthy, but we both were overweight. But I'm glad that I've been able to lose a bunch of it, and it works out pretty well. And the cat keeps me honest. Stitch the cat likes to get petted while she eats, and she'll yell at me every so often throughout the entire day. So I've got to go in and pet her, and that's exercise too. So it works out.
Very good. I want
And
to go
and
ahead.
Alamo, my guide dog, tends to to do pretty well. He doesn't exercise as much, but he gets enough in.
Oh, very good. Very good. Animals are a wonderful thing to have around at any age,
Yeah,
but especially as we age, they're just a wonderful thing to have around.
and
Um,
they're good friends.
and they're great friends. I sort of tipped my hat earlier. I mentioned that I mentioned the word happiness, and health and happiness oftentimes sort of go hand in hand in my mind. And as it turns out, again, one of the things that I discovered during research, and I love this, is that our older years can be some of the happiest years in our life. And given my limited experience in these older years, I'm not yet an expert, but I do believe it's true. But I want to mention to you what the experts have said about that. There's an author by the name of Jonathan Roche. He's a Yale graduate and senior fellow at the Brookings Institute,
Mm,
wrote a book called The Happiness Curve. And this is really kind of cool. He describes our happiness throughout our lifetime as a U-shaped curve. We start out up in the upper left-hand corner, all happy because we're young, we have no cares in the world, and we do. Our U-shape starts to crash down as in our 20s, being when we start the adulting process. And then, of course, we hit rock bottom there when we go through our midlife crisis and we're juggling career and family and our aging parents. But then happiness starts to rise again as we get older. And I just thought and there's so many other scientific evidence of that. I think that I don't think we knew that as older people. I don't think it's a common thing in our culture that says, hey, our happiest time in our life can absolutely be during our older years.
And again, why is that?
You know what? Part of it is lifestyle, but part of it is science. I'm going to give you a quote from Professor Christina Bryant. She's from Melbourne University. She says, not everybody's affected the same, but however, here's what she says, and this is what I love. It's social science. She says, our positivity tends to increase. Our life satisfaction goes up. We experience less stress and regret. And this is what I really lean into. We develop these cognitive abilities to enable us to deal with life better. We have the capacity, and this is my favorite word in this process, we have a nuanced view of life that allows us to be more content and be happier. And that nuanced view of life
Mm-hmm.
I describe is our wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Our wisdom makes us happy. Our wisdom allows us to deal with life better. And as we deal with life better, we can become happier. That's the answer. We're more wise. We have wisdom.
You were talking about your father earlier and how he was busy after retiring. I think one of the interesting things about all of this is that using him as an example, he did what he wanted to do. He didn't feel he had to be busy. He did it because he wanted to be busy. He found things to do, and I think that's really important for all of us. Is that we can only grow if we want to grow and if we want to continue to do things. And I think that's really an important thing.
That's absolutely true. Absolutely true. And you hear sad stories about
Mm-hmm.
people retiring and passing away soon after they retire, whether that's a month or a year, even 2 or 3 years. And oftentimes is because they lose that sense of purpose. They lose that
Mm-hmm.
sense of what is it that you want to do with your life. And and so that's so important to still have that purpose, if you will. And again, I'm always saddened when I hear those stories because life in our retirement years or our older years can be so blissful and bountiful.
Yeah, we can have a whole lot of fun doing a whole lot of things. And even if we continue to do the things that we did before, but again, we're choosing to do it. And I think that makes a big difference.
Yes, very much so. And if you don't mind, I want to elaborate on that,
Sure.
how I've approached this and what's keeping me busy. And part of it is, in my mind, I use the term living with intention, living with intention. And we sort of center our retirement, for me anyway, around values, mission, and even I'll call it purpose in life. We may get to talk about blue zones in a minute here, but in one of the blue zones in Okinawa, they talk about ikigai, ikigai or purpose or reason to rise in the morning. That reason to rise in the morning, sort of you wake up and you want to determine how is it you spend your time? How is it you want to spend your time? And for me, I've sort of centered my life around four things. And number one, relationships, family and friends. Although it's changed dramatically for me, my kids are off in their 20s doing their thing. So they don't need me anymore. They don't need me anymore, but I still maintain a relationship with my family as much as I can. I like to say that I live vicariously through my kids.
Mm-hmm.
My son lives in New York and he's graduating from medical school and going to go off and do that. And I'm living vicariously big time yesterday and today and the rest of this week because he is in Paris with his fiance right now. And so I am able to see pictures and hear about his joys in Paris, and he's moving on to Italy after that. So big time. And my daughter's living her best life in Chicago and just taking advantage of that. The other thing is friendships, though. I mentioned for me, it's family and friends, and friendships take a lot of work in a retirement. And so that is very, very important. What do you think about that? Have you maintain, I mean, that whole relationship thing, you mentioned your wife has passed on, and how is relationships working out for you in your life now?
They work out well. My wife's family lives primarily down here within like 45 or 50 miles of me. My brother passed away. I occasionally talk to his wife, but she lives in Florida. But my in-laws, well, actually not in-laws, because my mother-in-law and father-in-law both passed on, but cousins-in-law and so on all live close by. And Karen's brother lives up in Sun Valley, Idaho. And we make sure that we talk every 2 or 3 weeks, which is a
Oh,
lot of
great.
fun. We have great conversations. And also, I've met other people and I work on establishing a relationship. I don't tend to think there's a need to be unfriendly. If somebody isn't friendly to me, then that's fine. They can go live their own lives, and I just won't worry about it. But I like to have relationships with people. It's a lot of fun.
And it's so much fun. And I will say this, it's extremely, extremely important to
Hmm.
our mental, emotional, and physical health. We may get to that. It takes effort, though. You did mention it does take effort.
It
And
does.
I find myself scheduling time to talk to or meet with friends.
Hmm.
And it's so, so important. The second thing that I spend time doing, reason to wake up is I don't have a good name for it, but it's my personal self. And that is, my health. And so I mentioned too, I walk every single morning. I walk and then work out and sort of my lifestyle choices. And so that has become sort of part of my personal brand and part of how I live life because I'm gonna mention to you one of my life goals, if you will, and that is to live to be 100 years old. That is one of my life's goals is to live to be 100. And so that this whole category of living on a healthy and a daily basis is going to help me achieve that, I
Yeah.
hope.
So you walk every morning. That must be fun in the snow.
Well, you know what? It's funny you say that. I live in Michigan. I can tell you this, last calendar year, 362 days, I walk when I'm on vacation, but I would say that I probably walked 350 days last year.
Hmm.
There was probably about 12 days. There was some reason that I couldn't walk, and I will put my boots on. I will put 5 layers on, and I will walk in the snow.
There you go.
Absolutely. And I will walk in the rain. I will put my boots back on, and I will get an umbrella, and I will walk in the rain. I tell you why I do this because well, there was 3 reasons. Now there's one. My dog, I mentioned to you, well, when I wake up, my dog says, "Dad, let's go. It's
Hmm.
time for the walk." Now, she didn't care if it was raining. She didn't, she was a snow dog, so she even loved the snow. So it's like, let's go out in the snow. And that was one reason. The second reason is we walked on a path that the school bus would drive
Ah.
by us. And
Ah.
all of the school children loved my dog. I have a white Samoyed, and she looked like a polar bear. And so they loved waving at the dog, and I couldn't disappoint those children
Yeah.
uh, when we went for a walk. So I had to be out there. And the third thing is just, and now that the dog has passed, I probably didn't mention that, but my dog has passed, and I still want to maintain that walking because I
Hmm.
just know it's good for me. So yeah, I walked this morning. I had an umbrella, and I got the umbrella got wet, but I did not. So that's just what I'm going to do.
Yeah, well, for me, walking outside in the rain and all that, with if there's a lot of rain, it's kind of hard to hear things and all that. But that's why I really love being able to walk around the house,
Hmm.
um, because I can do that and do just as well and have a lot of fun doing it. So I I can't complain. It works out really well.
Michael,
Um,
I love your story about walking 10,000 steps around the kitchen counter. I think
yeah,
that I may end up using that in one of my talks someday. How, you don't have to have a big deal. You don't have to
no,
go to the gym. You don't have walking around your kitchen counter is a great idea.
hey, whatever works,
Absolutely.
and it does work well. So I as I say, I can't complain. My cat tends to like to just stay in our bedroom. Um,
Oh,
and,
interesting.
and what she will do is when she decides she wants to eat and get petted, if I don't respond right away, she'll come out and find me, however, and she'll bug me until I go in and pet her while she's eating. So I don't spend a lot of time fighting that process. because I also know that that's going to help her live a longer life.
Absolutely. And that is so true. Cats and dogs, animals in general, want socialization
Yep.
just like we do.
And they want it from us as much as anything. And I will talk to both creatures here in the house. So we have conversations and they love it too. And especially Alamo, the guide dog. Guiding is a very stressful thing for dogs. They take it so seriously.
Oh,
They always want to make sure they're pleasing and so on. And my job, in large part, is to try to keep the stress down as much as possible. So even if we get lost, my job is to not get nervous, but to say, okay, let's figure out what happened here, but not let stress enter into it because that will help me, but it also helps the dog. I know some people who have had like just an incredible number of guide dogs, and I don't know whether they stress the dog out or whatever,
oh
but
my goodness.
that's unfortunate. I have had my guide dogs generally last a long time. I had one that worked for a year and a half, and then she just became afraid of guiding, which
Oh,
had nothing to do with me, but it just happened. And I had one that worked 3 years because she was bit by a tick and she contracted Lyme's disease that morphed into glomerulonephritis, which is a
oh,
disease of the kidney that will cause the good stuff to be sent out of the kidneys along with the bad stuff. The glomerular
oh,
don't filter right. So besides those two, though, I had one dog that worked for 13 and a half years and other dogs that have worked for 8, 10, 11 years and then retired and lived for a while after that. So it's still good.
oh my goodness. What kind of dog is it? I'm sorry if you told me. What
Alamo
kind
is
of
a black lab.
black lab? Okay. Black lab. We've grown not grown up with, but for the last 17 years, my wife and I have had Samoyeds.
Hmm.
Had two, and I mentioned to you my girl passed away, and that was in November, and we are picking up a 5-year-old Samoyed in July,
Good for
and we're
you.
excited. We're excited to this will be our first. We've always had puppies, the two that we've had, and my wife convinced me that getting a puppy at this time in our life may not be the best thing to do, and I lost that battle. And so we've found a wonderful 5-year-old dog, and I have to tell you this part of the story, which I find to be excellent. It's actually a relative, a distant relative to my dog that just passed away.
Oh,
The father of my dog that passed away is the great grandfather of the dog that we're going to be picking up in
wow.
July. So it's very cool. So we're very excited to bring Amara home from Canada, actually, in July. So very excited.
We we in 2003, I think it was, I was working at Guide Dogs for the Blind as well as traveling to speak, and we had indicated that we would help foster care geriatric dogs who were retired from guide dogs for the blind, and rather than living in kennels, if they were sent back to the school, they would try to find families who would foster them. And we were called one day and we were told that, well, I was there and Karen was called. And so we both went to see this dog. It was a golden retriever. She was 12 years old. Her name was Panama. And she actually never ended up being a guide dog. They didn't really know a lot about her. She went to live with the people who raised her when she was a puppy. And they did that for about 6 years. And then they had to give her up because they were moving somewhere where they couldn't keep a dog. And so she ended up in Tucson, Arizona. We don't know what happened there, but she came back to guide dogs because the people there in Tucson decided they didn't want her anymore. And I don't even know what all the details were. But she wasn't responsive to anyone. She had a big lump on her back
Oh, geez.
and just all sorts of things. And they said she's deaf, she's got arthritis, she's
Oh,
got
good.
cancer, but she'll never die of the cancer. It's a slow moving cancer.
Oh,
And that was
goodness.
true. But they said, would you guys be willing to take care of her? And we said, sure. And
Okay.
what we noticed was that we spent a lot of time working to get her to trust us and that we weren't going to be mean, nasty people. And it took a while to do. But what we discovered was while she was hard of hearing, she wasn't totally deaf. Um, one of the reasons that the school said that she was deaf was that they literally dropped one of the big Webster's dictionaries right next to her and she didn't even respond.
Oh,
What
goodness.
we think is that she was really abused when she was living in Arizona,
Oh,
and she was afraid even to go in our garage,
oh,
and was just really one of those strange things. And so Karen loved to take her for walks, and at first she was afraid and she didn't really want to go, but Karen kept insisting. Panama decided that she liked that.
hmm.
And then one day we were going to go to a guide dog function at the Oregon campus, and we were living in California at the time. And I was putting luggage in the car and I was taking something out, and suddenly this dog shoots past me into the garage and into the car. And we knew we had obviously crossed over into some sort of a new era with Panama, because it was Panama that ran out and decided she was going to not be left behind, and she wasn't afraid to go out and get in the car.
Hmm.
And we had her for several years, but she eventually just got old and passed away. But we're so glad that we gave her several years of a
Oh,
good life,
that's great.
and she really loved being with us and having a lot of fun.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. And dogs can provide, we always say that dogs provide us so much joy in our lives, and they do, but and you've said it, we provide joy in their lives as well. And I
Yeah.
think that's so, so important. I do want to follow up on something else we sort of touched on, and that is sort of our attitude toward aging and how that helps us. And in my book, I actually have a chapter that's called "One Thing That Changes Everything," and it's a chapter on optimism. And I believe optimism is important for us in all of our lives, but it's especially important as we age. And I agree with Winston Churchill when he once said, a pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity, whereas an optimist sees an opportunity in every difficulty. And
Hmm.
as we age, we wake up our every day and we have opportunities, we have difficulties, and we get to deal with the world and see the world, and we get to choose how we deal with it. My wife, on the other hand, calls herself a realist. And to me, I think that's an optimistic spin on being a pessimist. But that's just me. That's just me and how I deal with it. But like I say, I tend to agree with Winston Churchill. Now, as it turns out, pessimism may have a genetic component in it. I'm joking, however. My daughter also developed a strong pessimistic streak in high school and followed her into college. And it would raise its ugly head around test time. And she would say every time she had a test, she'd say, I'm going to fail this test. I'm going to fail this test. And finally, in her senior year of college, she finally did fail a test. And she got on the phone quickly and said, I told you I was going to fail a test. And we said, yes, you did. So after hundreds of tests and thousands of hours of anxiety, she finally did fail a test. And I love looking at quotes from famous people that sort of mirror what reality is and what my reality is. And Mark Twain said, I have known many troubles in my life, and some of them actually happened.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned that how we look at life as we age and our attitude toward life has such an impact on just how we deal with our daily life.
Yeah. You
Um,
mentioned blue zones. Tell us about blue zones.
the blue zones. Have you heard of the blue zones?
No, I
Okay.
got to be honest and say I haven't.
Blue zones. Great story about blue zones and aging. Blue zones are 5 areas in the world, and I do want to grab my notes real quick on blue zones because it's important I get it right. 5 areas in the world that have the longest living people and the most centenarians, people who live to be 100. And there was a National Geographic expedition led by a guy by the name of Dan Buettner, who did research on these blue zones and to find common lifestyle elements that contributed to a long, healthy, and happy life. And to me, when I talk about aging well, and that's why I sort of started off, aging well, what does that mean? I know it intuitively means different things, but to me, it means a happy life, a healthy life, and a long life. So that's aging well, and that's what these people do. And anyway, he developed this list of lifestyle things, lifestyle choices that were common among all five of these blue zones. And for your audience, I'm going to quickly go through them. Quickly, there's nine of them. One is to move naturally. Now, again, we talk about walking around the counter. That's moving naturally for you. For me, I go for walks in the morning, but just some sort of move in naturally. Walk, ride a bike, garden, whatever makes sense. Number two is to have a purpose. I mentioned to you that Okinawa, which is one of the blue
Hmm.
zones, has the word ikigai, or a reason to rise in the morning. And having a sense of purpose, a reason to look forward to the day is so important. Number three, a way to deal with stress. Life gives us stress. I'm going to ask you, when I retired, I thought stress would go away. Well, I was wrong. It's just a different kind of stress. I have to deal
Hmm.
with it differently. So we need a way to deal with stress.
Yeah.
Number four is a nutrition thing. It's called the 80% rule, or Hara Hachupa. It's a 2,000-year-old Confucian saying that says, eat until you're 80% full, which I've struggled with because I like to eat. So I would have a tendency to overeat, and I still do, but I try to do my best not to overeat. Do I know if it's 80%? I don't, but I try not to overeat. You had mentioned that you've done a great job in losing weight and nutrition. Have you changed your nutritional diet to be able to accomplish that weight loss?
Some, and some just eating less. But yeah, I would say yes.
Very good. Very good.
Although I still think that chocolate's one of the best medicines in the world, but that's another story.
And you know what? Dark chocolate is actually healthy
I
for you.
know. Yeah.
Dark chocolate. So yes, I eat one small piece of dark chocolate every day. The people in the blue zones, nutrition is important for them. They do favor sort of that Mediterranean style diet. Um, and for me, nutrition's been important, but I do eat sort of a Mediterranean diet, but basically to make it even simpler, whole foods, don't eat anything in the box, and stop going to fast food restaurants. Those are
Yeah.
the three things that if we all did, those three things, eat whole foods, don't eat anything in the box, and don't go to fast food restaurants, all of us would benefit from nutrition.
Yeah.
Number six, almost done with a nine, is drinking red wine after 5 o'clock. Sardinia is one of the other blue zones. They drink a Cannonau grape wine. It's made from a Cannonau grape, and it's supposedly the healthiest wine in the
Hmm.
world. And I've actually had my local store bring in some Cannonau wine for us. My wife is part Italian. She's a big wine drinker. Don't drink. It's just one of that reach into 100 thing. But if I do drink, I'm going to drink a sip of that Cannonau wine. Number seven, belong to some faith-based community. Spirituality
Yeah.
has shown, we can go down that path if you'd like. Spirituality is shown to be a healthy habit. Number eight, loved ones first. Put your family first. And number nine, very, very important. We sort of touched on that, is having the right tribe, being social, and having lifelong relationships. And that's so, so important. And that's what they find. So that's the power of nine, the things that they do in those five places in the world they call the blue zones.
So where are the other blue zones besides Okinawa?
Yep. So there's Icaria, Greece, Loma Linda, USA, Nicoya Peninsula, Costa Rica, Okinawa, Japan, and Sardinia, Italy. Those are the five
Hmm.
blue zones in the world.
I'm trying to remember where he went. Michael J. Fox several years ago traveled somewhere in the Alps. Maybe it was to the place in Italy, but the people there laughed a lot and they were very happy people, and he believed that he could learn something from them. And I don't recall where it was, but it was over in Europe somewhere up in the Alps.
And you said Michael J. Fox went there?
Yeah.
Um, I don't remember seeing him specifically. I'm not saying he didn't, but if people are interested in the blue zones, if you're interested in aging well, the blue zones is one of the areas that you can do research on. And there's so many more things. There's been books written on it. There's a blue zone diet. There's actually a Netflix special
Hmm.
about the blue zones, and all of this information about the blue zones and how those people live long, happy, and healthy lives. I haven't gone to a blue zone yet, but I do. That's on my bucket list to go to a blue zone.
Yeah. And we're close to Loma Linda. and
Hmm.
so here, so I haven't really spent much time there, but I also know that I just basically, since it's me in the house, try to keep things very happy and very fun. So maybe I have a sort of an extra blue zone for one person here.
You are creating your own blue zone, and I
Pretty
love
much.
it. And actually, there are places in the world that actually are trying to take on the principles of the blue zones, and trying to do that. And there's a few cities, but I like your plan. Just create your own blue zone in your own house, and I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah, and again, it's a lot of fun. Most weekends it's just me here, but I spend time talking on the phone to family and friends and all that. So I do that. But I also get work done during the weekends that I never get a chance to get totally done during the week. And so by the time Saturday night comes around, I've accomplished everything that I wanted to do for the whole week anyway. So that works out well.
That's great. That's great. Hey, Michael, I see that we're coming to the end of our time. And if you don't mind, I'd like to just give a shout out to my book and tell people a little bit about
Uh,
the book and see if
yeah, I
they're,
was going to ask you to do that, please.
yes, that'd be great. So here's a picture. Here's what the book looks like. The book title is Are We Old Yet? A Casual Conversation About Aging. It really provides an optimistic outlook to getting old. And yes, I will use the three-letter word old. It's in the title of my book.
That's okay.
Yes, there are 34 conversations or chapters about aging. For people who are the science nerds, I talk about the biology of aging. Why do we age? It's called the 14 hallmarks of aging. Things like our mitochondria process, our DNA, and senescent cells, and telomeres, and all those sciencey types of words and why we age. Then I talk about, is there a fountain of youth? What is it we can do to help slow the aging? I talk about our new identity. We sort of touched on it. As we age, our purpose in life and our identity also changes. And it's important that we grasp that and understand that and take advantage of that new identity. And then one of my favorite chapters, and I sort of mentioned this too, is a chapter on rebranding the word old. What
Mm.
does the word old mean? It doesn't have to mean that old, tired, torn up thing that we once, it could be young and vibrant, not young necessarily, but vibrant and vintage and just very, very special time in our life. If anybody's interested in this whole aging well process, the book is available on Amazon and other bookstores.
Is it
And
available on Audible by any chance?
it is,
Okay.
there is not an Audible book.
Mm.
There's a e-reader, but it's not an Audible, and I apologize to you for that. When I do it, I want to be the reader. The
Yep.
book does reflect a lot of my stories, and so I do plan on doing that maybe in the next 12 months.
That'd be
I do
good.
have a website I want to make people aware of, GaryCole.com, and
And
my name
Gary is spelled with two R's.
two R's, thank you. So Garry, Cole, Cole.com. You can come to our website and learn about the book. And I do two blogs a month. And so I write about different aging topics. And you can sign up and give me your first name and your email, and you can have that delivered to your email address if you like. So
Sure.
uh, yes, this whole aging thing, Michael, is important. It's important that we understand it. It's important that we accept it. It's important that we, almost embrace it, right? I mean, it's something that I think you and I are on much, much on the same page in terms of how we face the prospects of aging and how we take advantage and make it the best we can.
And I am also of the opinion, as you pointed out, about faith being a part of our psyche, our life, and aging, and just something that we ought to all do more and more of anyway. I tend to believe that there's a lot of value in that.
Absolutely. And I've
Hmm.
had many conversations about faith and I'll call it spirituality.
Yeah.
Uh, and in the book, I talk about there's a chapter called the Science of Religion, the science of spirituality, and actually specifically the medical science of it. And having a belief in a higher being, no matter what that higher being is, can make us happier, healthier, and live a long time. And there's science behind it. And I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And so that's great.
Have
That's
you
great.
ever read the book "The Greatest Thing in the World Is Love"? Or "The Greatest Word in the World"? I guess this thing in the world is love, by Henry Drummond.
I have not.
It's a great book. It's a very short book. Um, and what he points out is that when you talk about all the different things like faith and so on, the greatest word of all is love, and the greatest concept is love. It was in the late 1800s when he wrote it.
Oh, it was. Okay, so it's a classic.
It's a good book.
You know what? I should read it. I do believe that happiness and love sort of go arm in arm together
Yeah.
because I do believe that that they can affect each other in a great way for sure.
So, what would you say is your top 10 list of aging well?
Hmm. On my top 10 list. So in my book, I have a chapter called The 10 Pillars of Living a Happy, Healthy, and Long Life. And it goes into the detail about that. Now, I'm asked that question a lot, and typically people only want the top five. They're like, yeah, I don't want 10. 10's too many. So give me the top five. So those who
Okay.
want, go get my book, but let me give you the top five. Here they are. And they're redundant to some of what we've talked about, very much so. But it is what the science and the longevity people will tell you. Here's the top five. Number one, healthy sleep. Not just 8 hours, but sleep healthy. And there's a way to do that. My book explains how to have a healthy sleep. Number two, proper nutrition. Yes, the experts favor that Mediterranean diet, but just like I said, avoid sugar, avoid fast food, eat whole foods, and don't eat anything that comes in the box. That's number two. Number three, exercise, some sort of movement. Walk around your kitchen counter. Do it for 30 minutes. Do whatever it is that you can do to basically move on a daily basis. Number four, focus on relationships. Relationships, family, friends, however you want to do it, make it a priority. Expand your network if you necessarily need to. Go out to breakfast, go out to brunch, or I think you even mentioned just be nice to people when you
Mm-hmm.
meet them in public.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know the names of the cashier at my grocery store. I want to know the name of the waitress or waiter at my favorite restaurant so we can have a conversation. So
Mm-hmm.
have a relationship. And then finally, live with purpose. This is a big deal, having some purpose or some reason to wake up in the morning. Now, the purpose doesn't have to be grandiose. It's not like I'm going to wake up tomorrow and cure cancer, although that'd be wonderful if I did.
I wish you would.
I know it. By the way, there's a lot of research into cancer,
I
and that's
know.
good. But here's the thing. It's not about changing the world. It's about changing our world and
Mm-hmm.
making us a reason to get up in the morning, giving us a reason to look forward to the day. And that is so, so important. So that is it. Those are the top five that I am now telling people. The rest of the
Perfect.
five are wonderful and they're great. I would encourage people to read it in the book, but for the sake of what we're going to do here today, I'll give you those top five.
I think that's perfect. And I think it's a great way to end everything that we've been doing. So, once more, if people want to reach out to you and learn from you or communicate with you, how best can they do that?
The best way is through my website, GarryCole.com. And there's a mechanism for chatting back and forth. And so I'd be happy to meet new people and have conversations about aging. So, and aging well. So GarryCole.com would be the best way to reach.
Cool.
I do have a LinkedIn profile. I'm on LinkedIn, Garry Cole. And then I also have a YouTube
Hmm.
for my book, and also a Facebook. Are we old yet? Question mark. So those
And
are other ways that they can get a hold of me.
and again, Garry is spelled with two R's, Garry. So reach
Yes.
out to Garry, and I think you'll find it very pleasurable, very enjoyable, and I think whoever reaches out and talks to Garry is going to learn a lot. I know I did today, and I enjoyed this a whole lot. I'd love to hear from you as well. If you have a chance, please feel free to email me at speaker@michaelhingson.com. So that's speaker, SPEAKER, at Michael Hingson, MICHAELHINGSON.com. Love to hear from you. Wherever you are observing the podcast today, really would appreciate it if you'd give us a great review on the podcast. And Garry, for you and all of you out there listening, if you know anyone who you think ought to be a guest on our podcast, including all of you, feel free to email me at speaker@michaelhingson.com. Love to chat with you and love to hear your stories as well. So with that, I'm going to say, Garry, it's really been wonderful. We've enjoyed having you on. The hour went by really fast, and thanks very much.
Thank you, Michael. It's been a pleasure.
If you're ready to go deeper into the ideas that shape how we see ourselves and others, I have a free gift for you. Head over to michaelhingson.com and download my free ebook, Blinded by Fear. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep choosing to live with an unstoppable mindset.